This session will examine how Ombudsman institutions can navigate the opportunities and challenges presented by rapid technological change, from ensuring fairness in artificial intelligence systems to protecting digital rights and accessibility. The discussion will be guided by Ms. Rachel Bondia Attard, Head of Media and Communication Strategy at the Malta Chamber. Rachel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Teik. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Honourable Ombudsman Zamit McKeon, distinguished guests, colleagues. Thank you for joining us for this last session. This session will, as Prof. Teik said, will examine how Ombudsman institutions can navigate the opportunities and challenges presented by the rapid technology and ensure fairness in AI systems to protect digital rights and accessibility. And to start, I would like to welcome on stage the panel speakers. They're already here. I start with Tena Šimonović, Einwalter. I'm not sure if I pronounced your surname correctly, but Ombudsman of the Republic of Croatia, Ulle Madise, Chancellor of Justice of Estonia, David Bondia, Ombudsman of Barcelona, Simona Granata-Menghini, Director Secretary of the Venice Commission, Council of Europe, and Professor Alexiei Dingli, who is the professor at university in the ICT faculty. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we start, I would like to make a quick exercise, but you can't participate, Professor Dingli, in this, okay? How many of you use AI on a daily basis in their work, in their life? You don't need to be shy. It's okay to use AI. It's not a sin. It doesn't fall under the 10 Commandments, okay? Okay. This is encouraging, but not. We need more people to use AI, okay, as we will see today. Digitalization and artificial intelligence are reshaping the way the public administration function. And I would also like to add that it is also in the private industry that is, I would say, encouraging even public administration to use more AI, to be more efficient. And in fact, as the Chamber of Commerce in Malta, we work closely with the Office of the Ombudsman in relation to this. AI-driven decision-making and large-scale data collection bring new questions of accountability and transparency. So we need to give more work to our NAO here. Persons must retain the ability to understand and change decisions that impact them, whether taken by humans or algorithms. Ombudsmen are key to ensure that innovation remains guided by fairness and no discrimination. At the same time, Ombudsman institutions must embrace innovation themselves, using online platforms. The fact that our Ombudsman in Malta raised his hands for my question gives me hope as well. Yet, they must also safeguard accessibility so that no one is left behind in the digital era. And we also need to make sure that we have an aging society, not just in Malta, but in the EU, and we need to embrace everyone and make sure that they are included as well in this digital era. I stop here for the time being because this is a very pet subject of mine, and I would like to ask my first speaker, Ms. Tena Šimonović Einwalter, Ombudsman of the Republic of Croatia. Tena, thank you.
So first of all, congratulations on the anniversary to the Parliamentary Ombudsman of Malta, and as well, hello and thank you to the heads and chairs of the Association of Mediterranean Ombudsmen and IOI Europe, and hello, dear colleagues. Now, we already are in the age of digitalization and AI, This last panel touched upon the issue, but also in the introductory speeches, we heard both Ombudsman Van Zuppman speak about things we all agree on, such as that AI might be a danger, and the European Ombudswoman speaking about the technological revolution happening in front of our eyes, Professor Thake speaking about the new context and Ombudsman needing to embrace the new realities and renew. Now, digitalization and AI as issues do overlap, but there are also differences, and there are differences in our countries in how advanced we are and how advanced our public systems are in using AI and in digitalizing. But I think we can agree that digitalization is already here, and AI is coming quickly and inevitably. Now, speaking about digitalization, I remember 17 years ago when I joined the institution, moving on up in stages, the complaints we received were written by hand. Translation was done by official translators only, and in relation to good governance, one of the main issues was that citizens had no information from public institutions, and one of the biggest problems that they had was they needed to bring bags of different papers to different institutions that other institutions already had, sometimes notarized, sometimes stamped, sometimes paying additionally for these stamps. These institutions not communicating to each other and not enabling citizens what we now think are standards of good governance. Now, where are we today? Many public bodies have digital platforms, including many countries having central points for all public sector information and services. In Croatia, it's called the e-citizen. And what we already see is certain advantages. No long lines in many cases. No need to have papers. Citizens can do things from the comfort of their homes or jobs, hopefully during their breaks, and things are becoming easier. At the same time, we know that already some are being left behind, because not all citizens of all our countries have access to these digital platforms for various reasons. Sometimes it may be due to their socioeconomic status. Because if there are areas where people do not have access to internet, if there's areas where people do not have access to electricity and don't have the appropriate machines, they certainly do not have access to these platforms. One of the issues that I have been advocating for in monitoring how the citizens of Croatia have access to these types of new services is also always not forgetting those who are not using them for various reasons. And parts may be due to age, they are maybe due to education, but also to the socioeconomic ground. Now, with relation to AI, maybe 7 years ago, 6 to 7 years ago, when I started working on AI and its influence in human rights and equality at the European level, it was a novel topic. People had some ideas, usually based on Hollywood movies, of catastrophic events which will happen when robots take over the world. Now, AI has become a household issue. Children use it to do their homework. Civil servants, including possibly in our institutions, use it maybe without us knowing it. And it's become a topic of many debates, both in the public sector as well as in the private sector. Many interests involved, lots of money and resources involved, even global competition driving many of the discussions, especially in recent times, in some new directions that we weren't thinking of a couple of years ago at the European level. Now, again, when I started at European level, it was focusing on the equality aspect and vulnerable groups. As a member of the European Commission on Racism and Intolerance of the Council of Europe, later as the chair of the European Network of Equality Bodies, looking into what equality bodies should focus on. And this work has continued. But also, I had the great pleasure to represent ECRI in Kahai, a group within the Council of Europe who, for 2 years, from 2019 to 2021, was looking into whether we need a new convention at the level of the Council of Europe, or the European Convention on Human Rights would be enough. The conclusion was we need a new convention. Then we worked for 2 years on drafting the new convention. So it was 46 representatives of the Council of Europe member states, the EU, and 11 non-Council of Europe member states, because the idea for this conference is it's open to signatures and ratifications globally, that it has a global outreach. It was finally adopted in May 2024, and it is really the first ever international legally binding treaty. Now, at the same time, within the EU, the AI Act was being developed, negotiated, and finally adopted, although, as I'm sure you've heard, there are now discussions about delays in implementation and so on, and some serious issues that are being discussed within the EU. Now, nationally, I was focusing on this issue as a deputy. It was then worked on within the issues of privacy and data protection, which is a common mistake. People tend to reduce the risks of AI to privacy issues and data protection issues, but it's much more than that. And so when I became the Ombudsman of Croatia some 4.5 years ago, I said, okay, we need to look forward. We have since had a dedicated chapter in the annual report on AI. We've had a couple of inquiries, we give recommendations. One of the more important ones was to have a registry for use of AI by public sector institutions. We still don't have it. What is currently happening is that we are a part of the working group for the necessary amendments to the national legislation for introducing the AI Act into the Croatian legal system, and in the working group on the national strategy of AI. And we have also been named the Article 77 AI Act body, which is something that the European Commission sees ombudsman institutions, much as NHRIs, equality bodies, data protection authorities, ombudsman for children, and so on, should have a role in. Now, regarding AI, the issues in front of us, there are dangers. Yes, sure. There are also opportunities. What are the opportunities? I would say it is the improved access to institutions. It is the new opportunities for social engagement, also for public participation, the opportunities for better data analysis and analyzing systemic challenges and changes, also by public institutions, by the state. But there's also many dangers and challenges. There's exclusion from these digital platforms, and especially for vulnerable groups in relation to the use of AI, issues that have to do with data sets used for learning being based on certain types of data and from certain groups, and also inadequate representation in AI development processes by certain groups, vulnerable groups in the society. What we know about the use of AI by public authorities so far, what is going to be happening more and more. The use of AI systems by AI authorities, including welfare systems, social services systems, AI-driven systems used to recruit, including civil servants, to evaluate, to do task allocations, to monitor performance, to predict fraud in terms of welfare fraud and tax fraud, and all that is already happening. What will be happening in the future, nobody really knows, and we can only imagine and guess. Now, what is our role? What are we as ombudsmen to do in this new reality in everything that is happening? One part is to monitor. Monitoring the implementation of AI systems, especially those high-risk systems, is also something that the AI Act requires for those who are these bodies within the EU. But I will not focus on the EU right now because it's only a part of us. Thinking about all of us and what we need to do, I would say it is looking into specifically those high-risk areas of use, including use by law enforcement, use by police, predictive policing, use in relation to migration, those issues which are most important for the state to be able to use AI for will also be those which will be most interesting for us in terms of looking at infringements of rights. Now, how? And to monitor is one thing, but let's look at protection. We cannot rely on complaints anymore. What we know so far about AI being used is that people will not know their rights are being infringed. They will not complain to us. So we need to be proactive. We need to monitor, and we also need to do inquiries and ex officio cases on our own initiative. Because when you are somebody who is receiving your welfare check, You receive your check, but you don't really know what's behind the calculation of it. You will not know that there is a black box being used, and very few people or nobody will actually know what is inside the black box, but you will not complain. And the Ombudsman institution will not receive complaints. So proactivity will be necessary. Also, to prevent and to promote. To promote transparency, explicability, to promote rules and not only ethical standards which are not legally binding. As a lawyer, I always say, standards are great, legally binding standards are better. So promoting laws and legal regulation of such things. We were recently discussing in the Parliament the introduction of a new criminal act in the criminal code, which relates to the use of AI. That's coming as well. Also, awareness raising, training and education. It's easy to say, and I think it's the right thing to say, that all children should be using within the education system about AI now. If they're not doing that, the country is already failing them. But more than that, how do we reach citizens, those who are already grown up, they don't go to school anymore, and a 1-minute campaign on TV will not do much difference, and they need to know about their rights. That's a big issue. However, one of the crucial issues for us as Ombudsman is promoting training of civil servants, trainings of officials, including of our own staff. And here, this is one situation where we are actually in the same boat as the executive government and people working in various ministries. They don't have the money and the expertise. We don't have the money and the expertise when we compare ourselves to the private sector. The private sector really here is the holder of the knowledge. And it will be very difficult, both for us and for other public institutions, to be able to compete with that. And now, finally, internally. It's not just about looking at what they are doing and protecting the people and citizens' rights. It's about how we can use AI, should we use AI in our own work, in our institutions. This is an issue that is only now starting to be debated, and I think there are certainly opportunities and challenges. I can tell you, in my own institution, we do not have the money to actually develop a great chatbot or to develop a great triage system. Although I can think about it, I can imagine it, but I cannot pay for it. However, I know it could be done. But I also know that staff in the office might be using various AI tools for certain things. And here the need comes for us as heads of institutions to develop clear internal rules on what can and should be used and what should not be used, so that we know when we receive a case in front of us whether a caseworker was using a certain tool or not, because it's a question of our trust and integrity as ombudsman to the citizens. I would say the opportunities are regarding triage, complaints intake, and classification. Natural language processing could be used. That allows computers to read and understand written submissions. We could already now actually have, with the technology that's out there and available, complaints being assigned to different departments without a human actually reading that. I don't think anybody does that, but it can be done. Information to citizens. We could have chatbots and virtual assistants to help communicate, to help with submitting online complaints, advising people what to expect, information regarding procedure, rights. We could have data analysis and systemic insight into patterns and trends, into internal organizational issues, into our outreach. Remember what Margaret was saying yesterday. Who are we not reaching? Who are we missing? We could have AI help with that as well. And finally, regarding information and research, summaries, as well as translation. You do not need translators for 15 languages working in the institution, even though you will have people speaking different languages addressing the institution. AI can help there as well. So there's opportunities regarding efficiency, consistency, accessibility, resource optimization. However, I personally would always be very, very careful about introducing AI in our work, especially regarding casework, especially regarding legal work, and especially regarding the outputs that we do, both in individual cases and inquiries and in reports. Why? Because it is enough to have one big breach, one big problem, and one big scandal. And then we use that trust and integrity that is vital for our institutions to have the trust of the public in us. So I would say we need internal rules, but we need to be careful. We need really, with all the other issues, I mean, the question also in front of us is, with all the challenges, all the threats to institutions, all the political challenges, one might ask, do you really have enough resources to invest? Do you have enough staff to have dedicated staff who follows AI, to have funding for trainings on AI? You need to focus on pressing issues which are happening now. However, if you do not invest the time and resources and people and your willingness now, it will be too late. This is an issue where taking the ostrich method will not be good. It will be happening in the world around us. We cannot pretend it's not happening. So I would say staff training, if it's not already being done, it should be done now. Ourselves learning as leaders, important as well, so we can organize our institutions and our work better. And finally, cooperating with market surveillance authorities, data protection authorities, in cases where the Ombudsman is separate from the NHRI and the equality body with those institutions, because the future is challenging and the future is here and now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your interesting speech as well about basically we need to keep on reskilling and skilling our workforce. Now I would like to welcome on stage for her speech Ulle, Madise, Chancellor of Justice of Estonia. Thank you.
Dear Joseph and everyone at your office, congratulations on your anniversary and keep up the great work. All the speeches yesterday and today, as well the informal conversation, prove that our work is never boring and it has always meaning. Why? Because we are closely connected to real life. As said before by Witt Alexander and Tena and many others, the only way to truly protect human rights, democracy and rule of law nowadays is that we must keep analyzing social change, be open-minded and embrace innovation. In the age of digitalisation, I would say our job as ombudspeople is twofold. First of all, as said before, we need to understand and use new technologies, including AI, of ourselves, when they help us serve people better. And second, we are those who have to recognize the risks, to make sure that technologies used by governments do not harm people's rights, do not weaken democracy, and do not weaken rule of law. Humans must control machines, not vice versa. And allow me a little general remark. I don't know whether you agree or not. Maybe I am simply too old, but what I feel, maybe it's not such a good idea to make every part of our everyday life dependent on the internet, electricity, and machines. Maybe it's not so great if we don't find our way home from our workplace without GPS. Maybe we and the next generation still must know how to read the old-fashioned map on paper, if needed. And we must remember something, some foreign languages, some facts, some ways. Think with our own brain. Maybe it would be wise. Otherwise, if people tie themselves voluntarily to machines, although they are not very ill, they only have to hope that no one, especially AI, pulls the plug. But now back to my own topic and to things about I know something. The European Union's GDPR and also the AI Act give us as ombudsmen and ombudswomen a very good legal support, would I say. And maybe it's our task to amplify the message. And the message is simple. First, it's not allowed to collect or store personal data longer than absolutely necessary. Second, it's not allowed to merge personal data from different databases to one big super database. And third, it's not allowed to use AI for predictive profiling or binding decisions. It's what the European Union law says. Mass data processing is allowed only as an exemption, when it's clearly justified, when the benefits outweigh the risks, and safeguards are in place. I very much like what was said yesterday, that we, as ombudspeople, should support our parliaments. Because who is going to decide what is right in our countries, in our concrete societies? What we share is the human rights and rule of law and European Union rules, but all the countries are slightly different, with different society, different culture, and the freely elected representatives of our people are those who shall decide what is justified. What's the right way to go? Of course, in the framework of Constitution, EU law, and what we also, I believe, should always keep in mind is that if you store personal data, you must invest in cybersecurity. It's very costly to protect this data nowadays. And you have to invest in privacy technologies. They exist, but very costly again, and not very convenient. My good colleague Kerti, sitting there, can tell you how difficult it was to introduce in our office new security standards. Because we, in our ombudsman institutions, also store a big set of very sensitive personal data. And we have to protect them as well. It means that our colleagues must accept these very strict security rules. And it comes not easy, and once again, it costs a lot. Our task will not be easy. I believe I'm not only in this room who has heard like technology enthusiasts or tech business says, again come the lawyers, some human rights activists. They ruin everything. China is winning the AI race if we continue like you want here in European Union. And then I always ask, do you want to live in China? I personally have nothing against China. It's a valuable culture, it's their life, what they lead there in China. But that's nothing what we should do here in Europe. If our parliaments don't feel that's the right way to go, and if our constitutions do not allow for it. And what I also discovered with certain surprise is that there are people also in our country who truly believe if only the government could monitor, control everything in our everyday life, all risks in the society would disappear. Why not to use safety cameras, face recognition? Why not to use body sensors, backdoors? Why not to monitor every communication and let AI to analyze it? Why not? No crime, no missing children, no graffiti, no car crashes, every tax paid. Then I always ask, why not to go further? If you recall the movie Minority Report, why not to send people to the jail before they have committed crime or even thought about it? Some innocent people will be punished, but total safety. Fortunately, technologically it seems to be possible, but fortunately the answer is no. Nicht alles, was möglich ist, ist auch richtig, say German people, German lawyers and German philosophers, even nowadays. And I think they know what they are talking about. German society knows how it was to live in DDR, in Eastern Germany, under total control of Stasi. And many of us in this room have, or exactly our parents and grandparents, have similar experience. Mass surveillance destroys trust in the society and even in the families. And like Maija Sakslin from Finland said before, the fact that we can trust each other in the family or whole society and the trust in the institutions, it's directly linked with the happiness of people and with the good life they should have. We all want that they have. And therefore, I would say that we must learn from history and not repeat the mistakes. And now I'm coming to the end of my short intervention. We must encourage innovation and the good use of AI, but we must also speak up when rights and freedoms are at risk. And we must remind decision makers, tech companies, and entire society that public trust, respect of human rights, and constitutional values, it's not obstacles. They are the foundation of a free society. And only when we protect human dignity, the way how human beings live, feel themselves. And if we protect human rights and rule of law, only then artificial intelligence really helps our societies grow stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chancellor. And now I would like to invite to deliver his speech Mr. David Bondia, Ombudsman of Barcelona.
Buenos días. Agradecer que nos hayan invitado a participar en esta sesión, felicitar al Ombudsman de Malta y a todo el equipo por el aniversario. Soy el defensor de una ciudad, Barcelona, y estoy aquí como defensor de Barcelona, pero también como presidente de AGOL, que es la alianza global del ombudsperson local. También hay representantes de Nuevo León en México, y la importancia de poder presentar y explicar qué hacemos nosotros con temas de inteligencia artificial. Antes, lo que haré es exponer brevemente cuál es nuestro papel y cómo lo entendemos por muchas cosas que ya se han planteado aquí. Nosotros yo creo que nos definimos y podemos definir a todos defensores y defensoras como elementos catalizadores. Es decir, viene del mundo de la química esto, que lo que hacemos es provocar una reacción sin necesidad de aparecer en el resultado. Nosotros, se ha hablado mucho esta mañana y ayer, en las recomendaciones que hacemos, cómo trabajamos. Nosotros el resultado, lo que queremos es que exista el resultado y por tanto provocamos esa reacción. Teniendo en cuenta tres cosas importantes. Tres cosas importantes es que no trabajamos con conflictos. Aquí ha salido mucho el tema de los retos, las oportunidades, los problemas. El conflicto es del ámbito político. Nosotros trabajamos con problemas y con retos. Y básicamente, ¿por qué? Porque queremos soluciones. Nosotros buscamos soluciones y si son consensuadas, mejor. Luego lo llevaré al ámbito de la inteligencia artificial. Segundo, como planteaba antes el auditor de Malta, el tema de la corresponsabilidad. Trabajamos con derechos, pero también trabajamos con deberes y tenemos un papel fundamental, que es un papel pedagógico. Es decir, no solo nos quedamos en la oficina, sino también hacemos pedagogía de los derechos humanos y de los deberes, esta corresponsabilidad. Y en tercer lugar, trabajamos desde la prevención. Digo bien, prevención, no de la prevención. La prevención es, los problemas van a existir siempre, no vamos a prevenirlos, sino nos tenemos que dotar de instrumentos para hacer frente a esas realidades y esos retos que aparecen. Y aquí es donde quería llegar para presentarles el proyecto que estamos desarrollando en la Defensoría de Barcelona, que es este IDEM, Innovación Democrática e Inclusión a través de la Inteligencia Artificial. Soy defensor de Barcelona, no soy un comercial, no les estoy vendiendo un producto, pero sí que les quiero explicar un producto de inteligencia artificial que con toda la teoría que se está haciendo es necesario también llevarla a la práctica. ¿En qué consiste este proyecto? No puedo pasar. Bueno. Ahora. Les voy a explicar la presentación del proyecto, los objetivos, la aplicación de este proyecto, el caso de uso que vamos a desarrollar en Barcelona y también los resultados que esperamos. Los problemas. Hemos detectado un problema y un problema que se ha abordado mucho aquí y es importante que vemos que hay colectivos que están en situación de vulnerabilidad, colectivos a los que no llegamos y que igual la inteligencia artificial nos permite llegar a estos colectivos. Por lo tanto, detectamos que hay barreras en los procesos participativos, barreras no solo de accesibilidad física, sino cognitivas, lingüísticas y procedimentales. Por lo tanto, lo que vemos es el problema es los procesos participativos importantes han llegado para quedarse, los estamos fomentando, pero hay determinadas barreras en estos procesos. ¿Qué solución proponemos desde IDEM? Proponemos utilizar la inteligencia artificial y el procesamiento del lenguaje natural, como se ha hablado antes, para mejorar la accesibilidad comunicativa entendida como un requisito para la calidad democrática. Por tanto, tenemos el problema, buscamos la solución y ¿qué hipótesis planteamos? Una muy fácil, mayor accesibilidad, mayor participación. ¿Y esto qué hace? Enriquece el debate democrático, porque ahora en los procesos participativos nos encontramos que hay colectivos que no pueden participar en estos procesos. Por tanto, la inteligencia artificial como oportunidad nos va a permitir llegar a estos colectivos. Nos alineamos en las agendas políticas europeas vigentes, la Estrategia Europea de Accesibilidad, también la Agenda 2030 para no dejar nadie atrás en las sociedades más inclusivas, la Directiva Europea de Accesibilidad y también lo hemos pensado para un ámbito de defensorías, pero lo podemos extender. Es un proyecto que es transferible a políticas educativas, servicios sociales y en resoluciones judiciales. Es un proyecto que está coordinado por una universidad, pero trabaja en todos los sectores. Hay sector público, universidad, hay defensoría local como es la de Barcelona, pero también hay empresas. Por tanto, vemos que sector público y sector privado estamos trabajando de forma coordinada. Antes se decía que no hay fondos, que le gustaría tener fondos para poder implementar estas herramientas. Buscamos fondos en proyectos europeos, el proyecto Horizon de la Unión Europea, que es sobre interseccionalidad e igualdad en espacios democráticos deliberativos, y es un proyecto de 36 meses en los que participan 11 representantes de Estados de la Unión Europea y también del Reino Unido, y participa Malta. Malta también, la entidad Inspire Malta participa, y lo que hicimos es complementarlo, este proyecto Horizon de la Unión Europea, con una convocatoria guidera para poder incorporar nuevos partners. Objetivos principales. El objetivo es, sobre todo, el objetivo central es eliminar las barreras lingüísticas cognitivas para atraer a la participación democrática a 3 colectivos concretos. Sobre todo a personas mayores, personas migrantes y personas con discapacidad intelectual. Por tanto, tenemos muy claro, como se hablaba antes, el tema de la vulnerabilidad. Estos 3 colectivos, personas mayores, migrantes y personas con discapacidad intelectual, que hoy en día no están participando en nuestros procesos participativos. Vemos el objetivo, utilizar la inteligencia artificial, esta herramienta, para atraer a estos colectivos. Objetivos específicos, identifiquemos las barreras a las que se enfrentan estos colectivos, estas personas, desarrollemos una herramienta de inteligencia artificial para simplificar los textos, para llegar al lenguaje natural, para atraer y que sea comprensible para las personas de estos colectivos, y también ofrecer a las administraciones públicas y a la sociedad civil estas herramientas que son gratuitas. Por tanto, no soy un vendedor de un producto, sino que nuestra finalidad cuando acabemos este proyecto es ofrecerlo a las administraciones públicas y a la sociedad civil porque será de uso libre, y elaborar un protocolo para poder organizar los procesos participativos. Las funciones principales es, como veis, la primera es la evaluación de la dificultad de textos. Vemos que los textos normalmente en los que utiliza la Administración para dirigirse a los administrados son muy burocráticos, los podemos comprender las personas que estamos aquí, pero hay un sector de la población que no los entiende. Por tanto, simplificar estos textos, evaluar. Luego haremos una simplificación léxica y una simplificación de las frases, y lo que haremos es un asistente de generación de textos. Aquí tenéis la imagen del que será el logo del aplicativo, y también una captura de pantalla de cómo, aproximando esta herramienta, lo que nos hace es traducir a un lenguaje sencillo y un lenguaje comprensible para personas mayores, migrantes y personas con discapacidad el tema que se está debatiendo. Los destinatarios: personas con dificultades de comprensión lectora, instituciones democráticas y responsables de políticas públicas, órganos de democracia participativa locales, regionales y plataformas cívicas, y toda la ciudadanía en general, y también aquellos que se dedican a plataformas de democracia deliberativa. ¿Cómo lo estamos desarrollando? Como se desarrolla en 36 meses, hay 4 casos de uso, por tanto vamos a hacer 4 casos. Uno será Barcelona, Madrid, Bolonia y Malta, y lo que vamos a ver es cómo implementamos esta herramienta. En Barcelona, un objetivo concreto, lo vamos a empezar, lo estamos diseñando ya, lo estamos trabajando, pero para ponerlo en práctica en la primavera del 2026. Ahí tuvimos un debate, ¿qué hacemos? ¿Creamos un proceso participativo expreso para aprobar la herramienta? Dijimos que no. Lo que vamos a hacer es un proceso participativo que ya está en marcha en Barcelona. Vamos a utilizar esta herramienta y vamos a organizar este proceso deliberativo. Vamos a desarrollar un protocolo para ver cómo funciona este proceso deliberativo y recoger las normas y ver lo que podemos adaptar. Y también lo que vamos a hacer es evaluar la utilidad de esta herramienta. Estamos diseñando la herramienta, pero aún no la hemos puesto en práctica, y lo que haremos es evaluar la utilidad y, sobre todo, recoger las opiniones y las mejoras que nos recomienden las personas con discapacidad intelectual, migrantes y personas mayores. Resultados esperados: lo que queremos hacer es un conjunto de recomendaciones dirigidas al Ayuntamiento de Barcelona, porque nosotros supervisamos al Ayuntamiento de Barcelona, teniendo claro que no solo supervisamos, si esto es una herramienta colaborativa, colaboramos con el Ayuntamiento de Barcelona y le estamos aportando una herramienta para que pueda incorporar a colectivos que normalmente no han participado o están subrepresentados en los procesos de participación. Vamos a promover en estos resultados la aplicación IDEM si se demuestra que es efectiva. Por tanto, para nosotros va a ser muy importante la primavera del año que viene para probar la efectividad de esta herramienta, y también qué impacto va a tener en la Defensoría de Derechos Humanos de Barcelona. Vamos a adquirir una experiencia que hasta ahora no teníamos. Es importante ver que no es que las personas que trabajan en la Defensoría, cada una por su parte, se vaya aproximando a la inteligencia artificial, sino que vemos que es muy importante tener una política de institución para aproximarnos de forma conjunta a la inteligencia artificial. Por eso hemos ideado este proyecto. Vamos a ver la experiencia que adquirimos, planificaremos y elaboraremos futuras acciones, y también, si esto funciona, lo que veremos es cómo incorporarlo al trabajo, no solo en este ámbito, sino al trabajo normal de la sindicatura, incorporarlo en el ámbito del ayuntamiento a todos los procesos de participación que se estén llevando a cabo. Hay un proceso importante que es vía Internet, que es Decidim, que es un proceso que se está siguiendo en varias ciudades, pero lo que vemos es que este proceso excluye a determinados colectivos. lo vamos a incorporar y también va a cambiar parte del funcionamiento de nuestra institución, porque también las quejas las vamos a recibir de otra manera. Ya estamos detectando que recibimos quejas que pasan por inteligencia artificial, el contenido de la queja está mucho más elaborado que hace un año, por tanto vemos que es un reto importante y un reto importante que tenemos como instituciones defensoras de derechos humanos, que lo que trabajamos es con los retos, tenemos oportunidades y tenemos que hacer frente a los problemas que se planteen, porque se ha dicho, la inteligencia artificial plantea problemas y tenemos que ser conscientes de los problemas, pero también nos da muchas oportunidades y tenemos que aprovechar estas oportunidades. Muchas gracias por atender.
Thank you very much, David, for this interesting project that you are as well participating in together with Malta and other countries. And my final invite is for Simona Granata-Menghini, Director Secretary of the Venice Commission from Council of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear Parliamentary Ombudsman, dear esteemed participants and panelists. First of all, let me express my gratitude for an event which has shown on the part of our dear Joseph and the whole team, Jürgen and all the others, professionalism, generosity, proactiveness, and kindness. So for this, I really wish to thank you. We must adapt to change. We must be open to change. The General Auditor of Malta has just told us, reminded us, we have to be open to change. That means we have to adapt to change. We have to anticipate change. We have to anticipate the opportunities that new technologies, artificial intelligence can give us, and we have just heard a wonderful presentation of our project, which is based on using artificial intelligence to enhance protection of human rights and participation in public life. But we all know that new technologies and artificial intelligence also may represent threats to democracy, to human rights, and to the rule of law. We must anticipate. I believe the Council of Europe has anticipated, it has been anticipating for years, the problems that may arise out of these technologies if they are not used correctly. And we have heard already about the Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence, which is based on a system of risk and impact management. And it is also accompanied by Huderia, which is a tool for risk and impact assessment for AI systems. But what does it mean to anticipate the risks of new technologies, digital technologies? Some of them are new, some of them are not. We have mentioned, it has been mentioned before, the rule of law checklist of the Venice Commission. It is a tool which is meant to help us all deal with these threats, all threats. The issues which have been discussed within the concept of the rule of law checklist, which is being updated, relate to data protection, surveillance, and the deployment of artificial intelligence and digital technologies. And we can see that the use of these technologies has relevance under most, if not all, the benchmarks of the checklist. For legality in the first place, do the authorities comply with the law when they deploy artificial intelligence technologies? And here we talk about data protection, how these data are collected, stored, and used through automated systems. But also, is there a due authorization for the use of AI technologies? Is there transparency? Is there human oversight of the AI operations? Do independent authorities exist that can monitor the use of these systems? And then are there remedies? This is legality, the legality aspect. Let's look at the legal certainty aspect. Are there mechanisms that ensure that the AI system which are used or may be used by public authorities, by the way, not only by public authorities, also by private persons. The states have an obligation to ensure that the use of AI, even if it is operated or deployed by private actors, should comply with these rules. So, is there a right to know that AI is used by public authorities? By the way, I'm talking to the community of ombudsmen. You have been so kind to admit me for 2 days, even though I have a past experience as deputy ombudsman myself. You are monitoring, but as was reminded just now, you are also public authorities. You are also constitutional bodies, so you also have to respect these principles. So there is a right to know that AI is being used. There must be safeguards of reliability, cybersecurity, transparency. There must be minimal technical requirements for the AI which is used. There must be certification of the algorithms, an auditability of the algorithms, and there must be mechanisms that ensure compliance with these requirements. And then let's go to the prevention of abuse of powers. I'm following the benchmarks. If an administrative decision is based on an AI system, there should be an explanation of why it is necessary for the AI to make the prediction. And who is responsible if the system goes wrong? What if something happens? And which parts of the decision are left to human supervision and which are fully automated? Who is responsible for this? I think there is a very immediate application of this principle if we think, and I think it's been mentioned several times with public assemblies and law enforcement. There is an increased use of AI or intention to use or plan to use, maybe even laws allowing the use of facial recognitions, for example. Is the public informed that this is being used? Are there rules about how these systems are used? What systems are used? Are they, do they meet these requirements? Are they good enough to be used? So the people knows, do we know what happens afterwards? Do we know, is it possible to complain? On which basis? What happens to the information which is stored during a demonstration? You just go to a demonstration, this is a constitutional right. What happens to your facial data? Where are they? What are they used for? And what if you're accused of something? What if you are considered to have done something? What if it is not true, by the way? Equality and non-discrimination, we have heard it before. There is an issue there too. There may be an issue there too. First of all, equal access to new technologies, which is far from being granted. It's not true that everybody has access to new technologies, and everybody should have. At least there should be reasonable access, because nowadays not having access to these technologies means being excluded from the exercise of rights, from the protection of rights, but also from public participation. And then, is equality and non-discrimination a criterion which is used for certifying an AI system? Are algorithms designed, checked for not propagating discriminatory bias, for example? Is this a criterion which is used? And then we go to access to justice. Access to justice is a very, very sensitive area, a very important one. First of all, it should be provided by the law. When AI, when digital technologies are used, there should be a legal basis. But also, there should be a distinction between the use, the implementation of use of these digital technologies, when it is done for a better administrative management of the judiciary, this is one thing, and I think we all know, and I think you all agree that it can help increase efficiency, increase speed, transparency. But then there is another use, and that is the use of assisting the judge in assessing the facts and even in applying the law. This distinction should be made. And if AI is used to assist the judge, should the decision be fully automated? We believe that not. There should be human supervision. The judge should be the one who decides in the end of the day. But also, what systems are used? We go back to the previous criteria. Are there minimum requirements? Are there technical and minimum requirements for these systems? And then, has this system been checked? Has the impact been checked before? Is there a reporting system that allows to perfect the system if it is being used? And then, is there a right to complain? And if you want to complain, you need to know what is happening. So we go back to all the other criteria. There will be a lot to say. My topic is the role of the Ombudsman. What role does an Ombudsman institution have in this context? First of all, as I said, as constitutional bodies, you are under all the duties other state authorities have to meet these requirements. But then, the checklist gives two specific roles, tasks to the Ombudsman institution. One is in the prevention of abuse of power. And it says, is there supervision of public administrative action by an ombudsman-like institution? So the Venice Commission finds that an ombudsman-like institution has a very important role to play. This is specifically indicated, and it is also specifically indicated in respect of emergency situations. We have lived through the longest and more general emergency situation in the history of modern democracy, so we know how important it was to have this oversight, independent oversight mechanism. And you certainly have identified in the areas, in what I've mentioned now, how relevant this is in your daily work, in all you do. But there is another aspect which I would like to stress briefly, and that is that the new checklist, the revised checklist which we are preparing, has a more extensive section on checks and balances. And there is a new part on institutional checks and balances, where the benchmark raises the question of whether there exists an independent, non-political body that in the field of human rights, for example. So that gives also the role of the Ombudsman as an institutional check on power. This has been mentioned before. But there is not only the institutional checks, there is not only this role of supervision of concrete cases, of respecting cases. It has been said before, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm drawing from all the previous presentations, but it is because I was listening very, very carefully. It is not only laws and constitutions. They are necessary, they're not sufficient. Good laws, good constitutions need to be applied well, they need to be interpreted well, they need to be known well. So what the role of the Ombudsman in this context, in particular, is to promote the culture of legality, to promote a culture of rule of law compliant use of digital technologies. Because digital technologies need to be put in the framework of the rule of law so that they do not become a threat to respect for human rights and democracy. So it is essential to do this. And in order to do this, the Ombudsman institutions need to be equipped. Equipped, as I said, certainly with the guarantees, the constitutional guarantees of your institutions. The Venice Principles of the Council of Europe represent, I would say, at least minimum standards, and feel free to apply to the Venice Commission for opinions on your own law if you think it should be improved. But it's not only that. And when we spoke today about the rules, about the culture, is a culture of respect for ombudsman institutions. Ombudsman institutions need to be protected by the law, but they need to be respected. I thought today, when the association between digital technologies and Ombudsman institution was proposed, that it was interesting to see that we revolve around trust. Digital technologies are what today can probably most erode the trust, public trust in the system, in democracy, in the functioning of our institutions. And the Ombudsman institutions are probably the best placed institutions to restore the trust in democracy and respect for human rights, defending the rule of law. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Simona. Now I would like to invite the last speaker, Professor Alexiei Dingli, who is also a professor at of AI at the University of Malta.
Thank you, Rachel, Ombudsman, friends. Let me start by asking you two questions. First of all, how many of you have an active AI usage policy in your office? Okay. How many of you actually trained your staff, all of your staff, in AI usage? Okay, all right. Why did I start from here? A few weeks ago, I had a meeting with one of the largest hoteliers on the island, and they wanted to discuss the usage of AI. And one of the things they told me, listen, because now everyone is using AI, even those that don't admit it. And the last thing we want is that these people take our data. They have very important lists of clients, high-end clients. It's one of the top hotels in Malta. And the last thing they want is, of course, that they give it to the AI. They feed it to the AI. And my question was, are you sure it's not there yet? And this is something that a lot of people do not realize. This is something called, there's a term actually, it's called shadow AI. It's when employees use AI not sanctioned by the company. And I know as a fact, because everyone tells me that everybody's using all sorts of AI, irrespective of what the company provides. And that's why I started from here, because I think the first thing is you need to look internally towards your own organization and see how you can protect yourself first and foremost. But in this talk, I wanted to reimagine a little bit. That's why I called it the Ombudsman Reloaded, sort of how I would imagine the work of the Ombudsman with AI. And I'll start from the most ambitious one, which I know maybe it's not so doable, but one day we'll get there, the Ombudsman agent. And the idea here is that every organization, every entity, all right, would have its own ombudsman. Of course, not a physical ombudsman, but it would be an offshoot of the real ombudsman, sort of the agent, the software that's monitoring what's happening. Of course, it needs a lot of work, departmental integration with all the data, and I know that's a big hurdle, all right? Not everyone will be happy with something like that, of course. But as Steve Jobs once said, if you want to be happy, you have to sell ice cream, okay? Not be in this work. Once you have access to the data, then, of course, the data analysis of what's happening in real time. And most importantly, maybe the early alerts, okay? So when something is going wrong, try to prevent it before it actually happens. And of course, this totally with a central coordination. Now, there's another facet of the AI agent, which I think is very doable today and which should be done. And it's the person-facing part. And what came to mind is, that part of the population, which I believe has been growing in the past years, of what we used to call the digital divide. Okay, we've seen it during COVID. During COVID, we saw a spike of this digital divide. Suddenly, even people who knew how to use a computer were lost on why the microphone is not working, why the camera is not switching on. So COVID exposed a lot of these issues. But from what we're seeing, technology is advancing at such a fast pace that, a certain sector of people are falling backwards. And I think that is something that can really make a difference with AI. Why? Because even like we've heard before from the Ombudsman of Barcelona, today AI is offering something called natural interfaces. I don't need to know how to go online, get on a form, fill a form, or even send an email. I can talk to AI today. And that is what I meant here. Imagine if everybody can have an ombudsman in his pocket. When something goes wrong, he simply gets it up as if I'm calling our ombudsman and tell him what my problem is. And he'll reply back immediately, maybe sifting through the cases that are maybe doesn't merit his investigation as well, but also giving advice immediately. I imagined this to be an early warning system, and you know, it's quite doable. And in fact, I thought, listen, what would be a case study? So I said, listen, one fine morning, there was an unusual rise of child benefits, sudden pattern change, and new verification. Because if the data is accessible, and this is what I'm advocating, these kind of what we call anomalies are very easy to detect by an AI. Because the AI will look at all this massive amounts of data, it would ingest, of course, you know, the historic data, past cases, and come up with pain points of what's actually happening in real time. It would give them, of course, a risk, because not all anomalies merit investigation, and of course, cluster these problems similarly together. So like that, even the visibility of the Office of the Ombudsman would be much bigger if the AI is there to support the Ombudsman. The next thing is intelligent document processing. One of the most important, let's say, advancements we've seen in recent years with regards to AI is, of course, the understanding, or rather the interpretation, because it's not really understanding, of any kind of documents. Today, AI is very easily can process documents, can tell you what is being written on the document, even in handwriting, and of course, get all that information. Once again, it would pass towards the pattern matching part, and then even route those elements to the different people managing different aspects of the Ombudsman's work. But once again, it's reducing a lot of manual work that previously was being done by a lot of staff members. The issue as well of multi-channel. People today are accustomed to different kinds of channels, if it's emails, if it's an online form, if it's a WhatsApp message, if it's Messenger, or if it's just a phone call. So today we can gather all of these channels into one and managed by the AI. More important, and something which, you know, in our country it's becoming very, very important, is the issue of different languages. So in Malta, in the past 10 years, we've seen a rise of 100,000 people, many of them foreigners, many third country nationals as well, all with their own different languages. And today's AI are pretty much multilingual. So the language barrier, once again, is not an issue. Of course, you need to apply identity verification, but you know, with EIDs and all of these technologies, it's pretty easy. And then get the AI be the first port of call, but then, of course, move it over to the responsible officer once again. Data-driven decision-making. This is something I really believe in. I really believe that all the decisions should be data-driven. Probably because I'm a scientist and, you know, that's how I've been trained. But the visualization of data can give us a lot of insights. It could be visualization over a geographical location, so maybe on a map or something. It could be temporal, so according to a particular time, okay? But the nice thing with AI is that one, you know, you can easily visualize the data. And there is no entry barrier. You practically do not need to know how to program or use particular tools because, of course, the AI can now do it for you. Remember, one of the biggest things that AI is doing for us, at least when it comes to programming, is actually writing the code. So the interface between the person and the software now is becoming much, much easier. And, of course, together with automations, constant checks, etc., those are very doable pretty much today. Even predictions before something occurs. And remember, here we're talking also about using data that is publicly available, so not necessarily data which you need to collect or private data of people. But when you analyze things, one of the things, for example, one of our projects was with a supermarket. And for the supermarket, we use things like the number of tourists that come to Malta, the seasonality, the temperature. When you get all this information, you can make pretty accurate predictions, especially if you have the historic information. So using these historic data, you can then ingest it with an AI, and the AI makes the predictions for you. Of course, it doesn't mean that all the predictions will be 100% correct, but it means that, then there's the human as the gatekeeper who decides whether to take forward or not. But what we're saying here, preempt, prevent things that happen before they actually occur. Another thing which I think should worry you is the algorithmic issue, okay? One of the things that I'm noticing, and it's not surprising, is that every software vendor on this planet suddenly is selling AI software, okay? Even if it has no AI, by the way, okay? To complicate things further, all right, now there's a new term, you might have heard about it, it's called agentic AI, okay? So if you have something which was AI-ish, now they label it agentic AI and they charge you 3 times as much of what it used to do before, okay? And the issue here is, of course, what is the algorithm doing? Before it was mentioned the black box, all right? First of all, not all AI is a black box approach, and we should enforce the fact that even if it is a black box, we should request that AI is explainable. I advocate for AI a lot, as most people know, but I would never trust an AI without having the AI explain to me how it reached that decision, because that is where problems arise. So irrespective of whether it's a black box or a white box or a glass box approach, okay, always require that there is explainability, because the AI should explain itself why a decision was taken. Of course, there's always a human review, because there should always be a gatekeeper where the AI will affect people, their lives or their finances, all right? And once you're happy with that, then it will lead to safe deployment, okay? But remember, there have been quite a number of cases in the past. Even, for example, I can remind a few in the United States. For example, there was a case of an AI called Compass that decided on the parole of prisoners. And there was this guy who was denied parole, even though he had a very good track record in prison. And apparently, it seems that the reason is probably twofold. One, because the color of his skin, and second, because of the address where he's registered. Okay? When they asked why the parole was denied, in the US, this company told him, listen, this is a private company, we cannot disclose this information. Okay? So we are playing with people's life. AI is playing with people's life, deciding for them, okay, without even having the right to know why a decision was taken. And this shouldn't happen. Okay? Finally, because she's making the sign, from voices to policy change. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who, grumble or say things, but we never get the report, no? So you start hearing about things that are not working well, but then very few actually proceed to a report. And I think one of the things which an AI can help is also to harvest this information, maybe from social media, maybe from pieces on the news. Collate this information, analyze the patterns, and do an impact assessment, which then proceeds towards policy recommendation. So this can be an automated process that helps the voice of citizens, even those that maybe do not knock on the office of the Ombudsman, to have their grievances addressed as well. Finally, of course, I advocate a lot for privacy by design, so, automatic masking of data, controlled access, audit logging, safe reporting. And there's another tool which I didn't mention, but I'll mention it slightly, all right, the issue of synthetic data. Synthetic data can be a big ally when it comes to AI, because synthetic data can be used to model populations, and then we can use AI to mimic what will happen with those populations, where certain policies or certain systems will be deployed. So finally, how I see it, I see these 3 aspects that would define the future of public oversight. First, proactive protection. So let's try to be proactive even before things happen. Second, accessible justice. I think we should strive to reach everyone, even those that do not reach us, or maybe who have a barrier to actually reach us for whatever reason. And finally, of course, evidence-based reform. And this is, where AI and digital technology can really empower the Office of the Ombudsman. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Dingli. Unfortunately, we can't take any questions. I can't ask you questions, and this is very painful for me. But unfortunately, I've been informed that the Prime Minister of Malta has arrived, and we need to wrap up this discussion. One thing I just want to do is obviously to thank you all for being giving us very interesting speeches. I just wish that the European Union and all the European countries be as proactive as the way the AI is growing, because ultimately regulations need to be in place, as you all said, but let's not forget that AI is always 2-3 steps ahead of us. Thank you very much, and we'll just give you 5 minutes, only 5 minutes break, and then you need to come back. Thank you.